Hey everyone, Chris with Clutter Reduction Junk Removal in Southeast Florida. We are headed to an estimate / potential job, but first, we gotta get some gas. So I found Upside a couple of months ago, and so far it's been pretty cool. You're not just stuck to one gas station, you can find whatever's near you, and then in the beginning you end up getting like 25 cents a gallon off of it. But once you kind of do that for a little bit, you start getting down to like 4 to 7 cents. But if you can combine that with whatever gas station you're at, you can make up to 10 to 12 cents back a gallon, which obviously adds up with how much damn gas we go through. So far it's been pretty cool to have, and I use it every single time I get gas. Super easy to do, quick upload of the receipt, and you're good to go. So I was watching a video the other day, and this kind of video just kind of interviews businesses. No, it's not the upflip one. I actually really like that one. Different channel. But one of the things they had talked about was similar to junk removal. They were doing dumpster rentals, but there were some comments in the comment section talking about junk removal. The guy was explaining his costs and his assurances and this and that. And someone commented and said, you should just do junk removal. It's way easier and way more profitable. You're basically keeping 100% of what you take. Now, I don't know the seriousness behind that comment because it is YouTube, of course, and you never know. But I replied and said, not really, and just left it at that. I assumed he would maybe click on our channel and see that we actually do junk removal, and I don't know. But I was like, that's a weird comment to make. And I've had a few people that I've come across over time say, that's cool, you know, you must make a lot of money doing it. Now, there's definitely a lot of stigmas out there with the, you know, make $1,000 a day, make $2,000 a day, make $100K your first year, make $20K a month hauling people's trash. And while all that is true, the amount of money that's actually going in your pocket at the end of the day isn't quite that much, unless you're not declaring anything, you're finding ways to dump shit for free, you're not paying for helpers, which means you have to do all of it yourself, and you're still doing your own time here, so it's really not free. And you have gas and you have insurances if some of you have it, right? There's, like any business, there's overhead, there's bills, there's cost to doing business. So nothing is take-home pay, right? And I had somebody ask me, they said, how much do you guys actually make doing the business? Like, what's my salary take-home pay? And I said, it's kind of hard to say because last year wasn't great. This year's going to be double of everything we've done. So I'll tell you, we take a percentage of whatever the business does. We are not an S Corp yet. When you're an S Corp, you take a salary. It's better for taxes. So if you get to that point, do it. We're still an LLC. I do member draws every week. I take 30 to 40% of whatever the business makes based on the time of year. I personally need to keep my income lower for personal reasons. So I don't take 50%, which is what it's usually recommended when you're making less than $250 a year. That's just me personally. And then Tanya's on payroll and she makes her own amount. But it's safe to assume that unless you're doing this as a side hustle, in addition to something that covers all of your other expenses, and you're finding ways to get rid of everything for free, there's gonna be some cost involved. It might be a higher margin, but there is still some cost involved, and you're not taking home everything that you were pulling in. You would think that'd be common sense. People would understand that, but common sense ain't so common sometimes. And it's kind of, I feel like, exaggerated exactly how much money you can make in regards to what you're doing. So we're just gonna put hours out here as an example. I do not make over $250 a year gross with the business. Say that right now. Some people thought we were making a lot more money than we did for some reason. I don't know why, but I never claimed that I made more money than I do. We do not make over 250, right? We are within that 0 to 250 threshold, and I'm talking about 250,000. All right, that's just us personally. From that amount, let's just say, for example, our business makes $10,000 in April. Of that 10,000, we will take 30 to 40% of that as a member draw, right? Depends on how much volume we have coming in. So let's just say 3 to 4,000, in addition to any tips we may make. Now, everything else is covered. That's my take-home pay. That doesn't include any side work I do. That doesn't include if we sell anything. That doesn't include if we do any additional work on the side, right? That is strictly just business take-home pay. I think the average salary for most business owners is like 50 grand in the US, unless you're like getting to those high threshold numbers of like millions. But for the most part, I believe that's the average salary. but it comes with the perks of being a business owner. You have more flexibility, you have more control, stuff like that. Now, for actual jobs, if we get the estimate we're going to today, I'll record all of our expenses. But the first thing that we like to do is take all of your overhead bills, compile them up, that's your monthly overhead, divide that number by 30. And roughly, that's how much money every day is going away to bills. And that doesn't include your gas, that doesn't include your disposal, that doesn't include any equipment that you need to use for your jobs that isn't otherwise something you can reimburse yourself with. For example, if you were a moving company, you can go buy boxes and then charge your customer for the boxes to make your money back and then some. In junk removal, we go buy bags, but the bags just get used on the jobs. They're just to make the jobs quicker and more efficient. They're not really making us money back other than the time difference. So in junk removal, there's not really a lot of reimbursement for materials. So if you have to go buy a hazmat suit, for example, you just kind of have to factor it into the cost of the job. You're not really making your money back on it unless you charge for it specifically. So there's that. But overall, you mainly have your gas disposal and any labor you need to pay out. So just a real quick example, yesterday we did 2 jobs. One of them was $465, the other one was about $200. So altogether $665, and then we got tipped on both jobs. Now, from that, we will be pulling 30 to 40% of it. I usually figure it out on Sundays. So of that amount, that $600 mark, let's just say we do 30%, we're only gonna be making like $185, $190 off that whole day. Now, we were only working for 3.5 hours, so that's still, you know, $60 an hour, so not too shabby hourly wise, but that's technically for the day, right? And that's for me and my wife. She gets a paycheck for W-2 for tax reasons, but it's our money. It's our money, right? So we technically made $180 that day. So sometimes you're gonna have a high grossing day, maybe a couple of thousand, and you'll be making a percentage off of that or a salary. And sometimes you might not have a job at all and you make $0. Or maybe you go do a minimum pickup, it's $100. You might only be making $30 on that. And in that situation, that includes you driving to the job, doing the job, driving to get rid of whatever you have, and then going back home. That could be a 2-hour duration for $30, $40 maybe, 50 if you're doing 50%. So I think it's safe to assume that if you're gonna get into junk removal because you keep hearing, we make 100,000 here, we make $1 million here, we make 250,000 here, we're doing 20 grand a month, the business might be doing that, but you need to assume that there's gonna be bills. And the more money you make, typically the higher your bills are, more money, more problems. You need to look at what you are going to be pulling away. I know somebody personally that I used to work with. He started junk removal, did it for about 6 months, and then left and went back to his job because he made more money in his job than he did junk removal. And he wasn't doing too bad. For someone who had just started off, he was doing like, I think he was doing like $7,000, $8,000 a month on his own. Like that's what I was doing on average the last couple of years working by myself. And that was like his first year. He got right into it. He knew a couple people that kind of helped set him up with jobs. And, you know, that was great. But he had a truck payment that was like $700. He got a really expensive truck right off the back. He had his insurance, which was probably collectively, I'm just gonna guess, it's probably around $600 a month. And then he had a few other bills that he was running through his business. He had to pay to store his truck somewhere because he lived in an apartment building. And altogether, I'm just gonna take a guess and say his bills were probably a little under $2,000 a month. So making $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month, knock off $2,000 from that. And then from there you have gas. It was not a truck that got good gas mileage. You have disposal, which I don't think he did a lot of donations, so he's probably dumping everything. And he did a lot of debris jobs too. So pretty much twice the price to get rid of debris. So when you start factoring in all this stuff, you might be making $7,000, $8,000 in the business, but you might only be making like $1,500, maybe $2,000, maybe a little bit more depending on your situation, how you're set up. Because you have to keep in mind too, you have taxes at the end of the year. You can't write off everything. You can to a degree, or if you're still newer, you might be in a loss and you can depreciate your trucks and stuff, but there's a good chance you're not gonna write everything off. And if you are, you're probably gonna get a phone call one day later on down the road, or some men in black suits are gonna come knocking on your door saying, hey, we did check out your home office that you declare. Any hoosers. So hopefully that provides a little bit of insight. Like I said, if we get this job, I'll talk about the expense breakdown to let you know exactly how much money we make, how much money everything cost, and how much money we charged.
Yeah, I didn't know they were gonna, looks like they're done. Okay. Perfect. I thought you were probably waiting for them to...
Alright, so we did get that job. It's just the one pile in the front. She needs to go through and organize everything else. Obviously, there's a good chunk of stuff in there though, but yeah, basically that one little section, I quoted half a truck. Didn't really tack in any extra time, even though we have to go up and down the stairs, mainly because half that pile is empty Amazon boxes. So obviously that's going to be super lightweight, and I can probably just toss them down to Tanya, honestly. So we were able to get the landscaping guys to move up. Tanya speaking Creole came in handy, and now we're that much closer to the house. So I think it'll take us 20 minutes. And then we're gonna bring a closet door up for her. She asked me how much. I said, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. And it sounds like she may be a repeat customer in the future. So even more reason to, you know, not worry about something that's gonna take us literally 2 minutes to do. So we're gonna get started. I'm basically just gonna run everything down by hand. We don't really need the speed pack or anything. There's no food, there's no heavy stuff in it. It's literally just trash. So that's good, because everything in this trailer is trash from the last 2 jobs, and we need to just go straight to the dump. But let's get started. We just got to the dump, and we are currently waiting in line to then wait in line again. It is a very packed day. The line's going past the scale house, so we're probably gonna be here for well over an hour. Again, adding into the cost. Sometimes you have this and you're just kind of stuck here for an hour and a half, wasting your time not doing anything. But it happens. Sometimes we don't have to wait at all. So that job we just did, we quoted $390 for the job. We brought up a shower door. We didn't charge it for it. It wasn't a big deal because half the things there were boxes anyways. Now we're about to go weigh in for the dump, and I'm gonna have to do a little bit of a percentage of the load back here because the majority of it is from a different job as heavier furniture. So I'm gonna take a guess and say that her job probably would have been a minimum drop off, which means that it's less than 500 pounds, which would have been 10 bucks. That's my guess. So we'll just say $10 for disposal. To get to her house was 0.8 miles away from us. And then to get to the dump is 9 miles, and get back home would be 9 miles. So let's just go ahead and say 20 miles, which is 2 gallons of gas with diesel, which is 7 bucks. So far we're at $17 in expenses. This little lady over here is on a flat rate payroll, and her money is my money and vice versa. So we go back to, there's kind of zero labor cost technically going on here, and we're just gonna be pulling out a percentage of whatever we made. So $390 job, let's just go ahead and say $370 after expenses. So we would do 30% of that $370, which is gonna be like 10 bucks? Give or take.
Just about.
Something like that. About 110 bucks. Now, we were at that job for 20 minutes. Not a big deal. And we got a $20 tip each. But we're gonna be here for probably an hour and a half. But we have other jobs back here as well, so we could, you know, play around with the numbers. So that's just an idea to let you know exactly how much we would have been doing from this. Now, if I had done 50%, which is our goal next year, unless we do salary, then we would have been making a little closer to 200. But you're not taking home all that you're pulling. Like, the reason I always take 30% or even 50 is 30% goes towards operation expenses and bills. That covers our insurance, our truck payment, subscriptions, the invoice app that we use, DocuSign, things like that. Anything that the business pays for, technically, that's what that amount goes towards. And then that also goes towards my disposal, my gas, or if we have to go get more equipment. That all comes out of operation expenses. And then 20% gets chucked off for profit and tax. So we set aside money for tax. We just set aside like $250 a week, and that covers our quarterly taxes. And then anything left over that we would have to pay, we just pay out of pocket. And then the remaining amount is left for profit, which is basically like a savings account. And that gets dispersed into a few different accounts. One of them is just general savings, and we'll use that for if we need to go get like a new Dolly or something. And then we have an emergency fund for the business where we try to keep 3 to 6 months of expenses for the business just in case we go into and economy crash and we don't have jobs, or at least not enough to suffice for 6 months of bills for the business, we have a lump sum we can pull out from there. And then we have money set aside that's for like long-term savings, and that's for you know, if we want to get like a new trailer next year, if we want to get like a different truck or something. I also pull out from our SEP 401k from that account. That's like just future stuff. So that's how we kind of disperse everything. Tanya has some advice, but she doesn't want to be on camera, so she's just gonna talk.
I mean, it's always good to be aware of your numbers and know your expenses. Not to say you base each job specifically on that alone. You have your rates, but understanding how to minimize your expenses as much as possible to add more profit in is really going to be one of the vital parts in the success of your business. So for us, understanding if it's just a trash job and there's no donation, there's no reselling, there's no any way, it's just going to be that expense of trash. But let's say we can save time by doing another job and filling the trailer before actually going to the dump. So you might not think, but your time is going to be part of money too, right? The more time you spend doing certain things, the less time you are maybe out there marketing, maybe out there doing jobs, maybe out there making money, especially when you're like a solo or duo company. So it's important to really kind of understand the best way to maximize your time, your effort, your cost, your overhead, to bring in the most profit for your business. Because some people love to go big, and there's nothing wrong with that, having 10, 20 employees, 5 trucks, whatever it is, making $1 million revenue. But some people enjoy the simple 100 to 200,000 a year revenue and paying themselves, being the solo worker, having like 1 or 2 people working with them, and that's the most money in their pocket, and least amount of stress. So for those people, really understanding the best ways to maximize savings, going expenses. Obviously, you can cut your expenses as much as you want. Increasing revenue is always going to be the best way to go. But when you're smart and using simple tools to make your time more valuable, that really does add up to your overall profit for the year.